talking, we can't hear you.
No, I wasn't saying anything yet.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. I know what that's like, so I keep it straight.
It sounds like an echo. I'm not sure if that's when I'm speaking or if that's just on your phone, but it has an echo now.
Echo when I'm speaking from my phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
You speaking, Abdul?
Yeah, can you hear me? 1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little
Yeah,
better.
we hear you. It's got
It's
like
like
a background.
it's like a fan is blowing in the background or something.
Oh, yeah, because I'm driving. I'm on the road back to Atlanta.
Okay. Right on. Regardless, I can hear it all, so we all good. It just might be a little funny sounding, but nothing we
Well,
can't fight through.
I'll stay on mute.
Okay, right on. So peace to all the viewers. Peace to everybody who was able to make it to the study session, Maru study session. I just wanted to make sure I was still recording. So welcome to today's study session. Today let's just get straight to the point. Today we'll go over hopefully two topics or two documents, international law documents. One being called the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance. That'll be the first document we'll be reading from. Okay. And this is, as I reiterated before we started recording, this is an international law document that all of us, all the Moorish states have acceded to thus far. So it's important to study this and know how to exercise this, right? Because we can enact law from documents like these, right? And again, let me know if you guys can't hear me or this stops showing on the screen at any time. So the title is on the screen, right? And as always, it's important to read the preamble of these documents before anything. So we know the jurisprudence, so we know what this is really about, okay? So the preamble states, the states parties to this convention, right? So who can exercise this document? States, right? Only states, political governments, right? With state constitutions, state flags, etc., right? So it goes to say, considering the obligation of states under the Charter of the United Nations to promote universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms, having regard to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, recalling the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the other relevant international instruments in the fields of human rights, humanitarian law, and international criminal law. So if we continue reading, you can see all else that it is based off of, okay, in the preamble. But we're going to start at Article 1. Since we now know only states can exercise this article, right? Let's continue to read how we can, because we want to keep one thing in mind as more states. And again, if anybody has a point of interest, and you can intervene at any time, and I'll yield. But one thing we want to keep in mind is that when we're reading these articles, we want to question, how can we use or exercise this article and enact it through our own Moorish state, right? We want to take some of these articles may seem like they're saying the same thing, right? But it's creating a certain buildup in which it's important to have a compilation of that buildup when you're trying to enact a law, right? So that we're coming full scope, right? We're preventing all windows that we might be missing, right? Because that can tend to happen in treaties and laws, and that's the whole reason for codifications, right? So we want to keep in mind, just keep it simple and plain. How can we utilize this article? You might even want to take notes and put in one sentence what this article is about, right? To help you compartmentalize these articles when you're trying to find a certain base form in your own Moorish state government. Okay. So let's get started with article number 1. And we probably won't get through this whole document, but let's see how far we can get. Article 1 says, no one shall be subjected to enforced disappearance. No exceptional circumstances whatsoever, whether a state of war or a threat of war, internal political instability, or any other political emergency, may be invoked as a justification for enforced disappearance. So for no reason shall there be a reason at all for enforced disappearance. Now, what is enforced disappearance? Article 2 says, this is considered to be the arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state, or by persons or groups of persons acting with authorization. What does that sound like? Right? United States Corporation acting as the United States of America. Okay, so we have a group of persons or groups of persons acting with authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, followed by, yeah.
Keep in mind when it says person, if you don't mind, read over that part again. In international law, person is the state. Very important point, so that people don't think of it as an individual, but actually a state. Because every dispute and all issues dealing with international law is between states. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Because, just a second, guys. That's a good point, because the person, as we will further read here, is also in relation to what some people call the strawman. So when we're talking about protected persons, or what some of us know as this protected persons list, as was mentioned in some treaties, a few treaties, specifically the Treaty of Madrid, we can further understand how to exercise not only this document, but other documents as well in relation to persons, right? And enforced disappearance, as we're further reading. So it says support, continuing in the middle of the Article 2, support or acquiescence of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty, or by concealment of the fate or whereabouts of the disappeared person, which place such person outside the protection of the law. So outside of protection of the law, some Moors read, the Constitution for the United States of America, right? Where you wouldn't say for or of, doesn't matter. But some Moors read that and say, hey, this document in the 14th Amendment, right, that was later added, has turned human beings into persons or corporations, right? So in this document, Article 2, as we read in the end of it, it says placed outside of protection of the law. Now, even though the Constitution of the United States of America is not Moorish Constitution, it's not, we are not Americans, right? So we know that the whole point is that we need our own government and everything that a government should have, which is state constitution, state flags, etc., right? So what happens is, according to this document, what happened was that it was placed outside the law in several different methods throughout time. And this person, i.e. this straw man, some people call the straw man, is this person that must be protected. Now, why must that be protected? Because that's what's being utilized in reality, in law, in governments, as far as commerce, right? So the whole point is to put this person under a Moorish state government in its entirety, right? So we're talking about the protection of all persons. Article 3, now keep in mind, we're talking about how do we proclaim nationality, right? To claim nationality, you need a state. Keep that in mind, okay? So it says, Article 3, each state party shall take appropriate measures to investigate acts defined in Article 2 committed by persons or groups of persons acting with authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state, and to bring those responsible to justice. So this sounds like what Moors have been trying to do this whole time. They get arrested, right? They get pulled over, they get taken to jail and all this types of stuff, and they want somebody to establish justice de jure for that situation. But the only way that can happen is if each state party, right, enforces the de jure law. It has to be a state. So when we see videos and wonder why a Moor goes actually through the process of being booked, right? Why it actually goes through in the system as they're able to be booked, because they're not set up right. They don't have a state. Okay, so keep in mind that some Moors are, before we go into Article 4, some Moors have gotten caught up or stuck, let's just say, mentally. They've gotten stuck mentally by establishing themselves a certain way in the United States system. And by establishing themselves a certain way in the United States system, they found small victories, how to not pay a certain bill. They might have even beaten a case because they're really fighting corporations with corporations, right? Because the United States, even the Supreme Court, it's all corporations, right? So the United States will keep this hamster wheel going. Okay, that's why mayors will have, letters or documents, declarations, saying that we recognize all Moorish Americans. This is Moorish American Week, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing that's still questionable is that if they recognize Moorish American Week and all this other types of stuff, Moorish American Month, whatever, that it's still questionable why Moorish Americans wouldn't be able to exercise human rights. Human rights are still obviously being suppressed. So you see the hamster wheel or the game or the 50-50 split as to how de jure in its whole entirety that can be. Because that obviously makes no sense. To recognize but not recognize, or you're not even acknowledging, you're partially acknowledging, right? And then Moorish try to take it to international court, in which only states can do. But let's continue reading. So Article 4, each state shall take the necessary measures to ensure that enforced disappearance constitutes an offense under its criminal law. Right. Article 5, the widespread or systematic practice of enforced disappearance constitutes crimes against humanity as defined in applicable international law and shall attract consequences provided under such applicable international law. So,
Go back to Article 4.
Say that again.
Just to go back to Article 4.
Article 4, it says, each state party shall take the necessary measures to ensure that enforced disappearance constitutes an offense under its criminal law.
What it's saying there, this is where legislation comes in. The measures that we must take is to write legislation from our legislative branch to uphold those principles in Article 4.
Islam. So, exactly. So, good point. That's a great point, because that's simple and plain. When you're making your law, what article should you use? Article 4 in this document, which tells you, which, as more state governments you've already acceded to or will accede to, Article 4 of this document, that you have to, it's all about transferring the power. You have to establish how you're transferring the power. So what gives you that power? Well, this treaty and these conventions. What treaty and convention? Well, in Article 4. Okay, well, let's start it off from a clean slate, right? Well, what document? This document, Article 4. How? Or Article 4, what does it say? Well, it says each state shall take the necessary measures, right? That enforced disappearance constitutes, right? So we're talking about constitutions, right? An offense under its criminal law. So how are you constituting your state? Well, what law, basically? The law that you're creating. So you have to basically establish small degrees, right? To make a whole law. So you got to minimize further codification if possible, right? You don't want to make a law that just for one article, right? That's kind of immature, unless that article is just really that grand, But being that windows and by windows, being that avenues are usually left open when establishing treaties and conventions, or tend to be, it's important to cover the full scope of things, right? So that was a great point that Abdul brought up. So it will also be wise to, let's just say, since this document here is pretty much, you can use every article if you wanted to, right, to enact a certain law. That means you have to establish in such a way. Well, compartmentalize it, right? As I stated earlier, some of these articles might be about roughly around the same thing. You know, it might be heavily incorporated with another, heavily related to another article, right, somewhere in the convention, to where you can use both of them to enact one law, right? So we can compartmentalize it. So Article 6 says, each state party shall take the necessary measures to hold criminally responsible at least A, any person who commits, orders, or solicits or induces the commission of, attempts to commit, is an accomplice to, or participates in an enforced disappearance. So you know how Moors want to say, hey, give me your badge number, right? You're unlawfully kidnapping me, right? All parties, everybody who's a part in that scenario, right? In which, again, these are not individuals who are able to do this. It's estates. This is not hand out all your paperwork out the window because you want to play the judge, the prime minister, the legislative branch, the minister of foreign affairs. You're not going to put on all those hats and call yourself a government. One person, one individual, or two people, right? Or even a group that's not technically doing it correctly or establishing themselves correctly according to the treaties, right? So next point in Article 6 says, a superior who knew or consciously disregarded information which clearly indicated that subordinates under his or her effective authority and control were committing or about to commit a crime of enforced disappearance, or about to commit a crime. It says in the next point, exercised effective responsibility or control over activities which were concerned with the crime of enforced disappearance. So if you don't have to be there, right? But if you were exercising effective responsibility, right, over the activities, you're responsible in this too. So this is making the range wider, right? The next point goes to say, point 3, failed to take all necessary and reasonable measures within his or her power to prevent or repress the commission of an enforced disappearance, or to submit the matter to the competent authority for investigation and prosecution. So a lot of this sounds like what we already been knew, right? This whole document, I bet you every Moor can relate to, except this word state if they're not a part of one, or not even trying to have interest in forming one. That's the only thing that would throw this whole document off for the Moor who's reading this. It goes to say, subparagraph B, above is without prejudice to the higher standards of responsibility applicable under relevant international law to a military commander or to a person effectively acting as a military commander. And the last point of Article 6 goes to say, why does that keep popping up? The next point says, no order or instruction from any public authority, civilian, military, or other may be invoked to justify an offense of enforced disappearance. So there's nobody that can stop this. If they're not de jure following the instructions according to, well, we'll read according to the treaties established between the states, right? If they're not following the instructions between of their own state, right? There's a list of basics that they need to make sure they're doing. Article 7 says, each state shall make the offense of enforced disappearance punishable by appropriate penalties which take into account its extreme seriousness. Extreme seriousness. Okay. So this is beginning to shed light on what? Other windows on how we can let's just make it more accurate. Other international law documents, other international law treaties, conventions that you accede to as a state, that you can say, hey, when it comes to criminal law, when it comes to crimes against humanity, what documents support your ability to enforce penalties? Right? What documents? What international law documents? Well, those international law documents, right? The number of international law documents that basically tell you how to exercise laws or how to govern your state according to crimes against humanity. There's a number of them. Those conventions, treaties, articles in certain treaties, etc., are what you're to basically, again, compartmentalize. Okay, so you have this article, Article 7, right? It says this offense, enforced disappearance, is extreme seriousness, and that the persons, whoever is involved, should be punished. Right? So Article 7 gives you that power to do that. And you begin to establish laws for people who have crossed the line or broken the law. Okay? So it goes to say each state party may establish mitigating circumstances in particular for persons who have been implicated in the commission of the enforced disappearance, effectively contribute to bringing the disappeared person forward alive, right? So effectively contribute to bringing the disappeared person forward alive, or make it possible to clarify cases of enforced disappearance, or to identify the perpetrators of an enforced disappearance. So what does it mean by alive? Right? They say disappeared persons. A person can be an individual in a corporation or a corporation, right? So when they say forward alive, let's check this word alive out. In Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, this word alive, as was shown on the screen, you can see that it reads, as respects birth, it means that child shall have an independent life of its own for some period, even momentarily after birth, evidenced by respiration or other indications of life, such as beating heart and pulsation of arteries, right? Then it goes to say, or heart tones in response to artificial respiration, or pulsation of umbilical cord after being served. So artificial respiration or pulsation of umbilical cord. Umbilical cord nationality, nativity, natal, right? So we're talking about bringing the person back alive, right? So by putting this person, this straw man, in this Moorish state government that they so strongly want to attach to the living person, the living human being, excuse me, is is made proper when you put the whole so-called straw man under your Moorish state, right? It says without prejudice to the other criminal procedures, aggravating circumstances, in in particular in the event of the death of the disappeared person or the commission of the enforced disappearance in respect to pregnant women, minors, persons with disabilities, or other particularly vulnerable persons. So I'm gonna see if anybody else joins so I can unmute. Okay, yeah. Unmute. Okay. Did somebody just say something? Okay. So Article 8. So again, keep in mind that we're compartmentalizing these articles, okay? They're made simple. Okay. They're when we're establishing ourselves as Moorish state governments, we're looking at establishing laws in every avenue, every department that we'll be establishing from now, even for the future, of course, right? So we want to do this in a proper manner. We don't want to establish laws that we won't be exercising until later on in the future, right? We want to make things make sense. Well, what's one of the first things that you do, right? When um having to so-called establish nationality, such as when so-called Moorish American, right, wants to try to establish their nationality, right? A lot of the Moors tend to you know be drawn to the identification, right? Let me get an ID so I can really be protected, right? Now, these articles, this convention in its entirety, is in relation to state IDs, that whole sphere of when you want to travel, right? So this is pretty much one of the initial documents that more states can begin to exercise. Excuse me. In regards to establishing laws, okay, because when we're talking about establishing or developing your state, we're talking about a number or a certain frequency of things that's initial compared to everything else that comes later, right? So there's a certain sphere of development, right? So, in regards to establishing national trusts, you want to take into account what sphere of reality are you at right now? What pain points are you facing right now? Right? The obvious, what's in your face right now. Right? What are people going to jail for right now? Predominantly. What are the the Moors of the state governments facing in their day-to-day lives right now? Right? Because we got to be able to exercise in order to build the state. We got to have room. We got to have space. We have opportunity. Ain't that what they say? So in order to do that, we gotta focus on ourselves. Look at right now, real time, right now. Right. So it's a certain frequency of things is what I'm getting to, as far as the initial setup of what laws you want to focus on, or what frequency of laws you want to focus on. Right. You don't want to make laws for something that you have yet to establish, and it takes a number of layers to even get to that point. Right. I know a lot of us want to work for ourselves eventually, all this types of stuff, in which your Moorish state government must establish or create the necessary sphere of reality for that, i.e. enact laws. You're not just going to step in thinking you're just going to be uncontested just because you're a Moorish state and no laws are set up, and just because the United States is crumbling. That's immature. So we have to establish laws. We have to establish a whole reality, right, to be able to come into this harmoniously. So Article 8 says, without prejudice to Article 5, a state party which applies to a statute of limitations in respect of enforced disappearance shall take the necessary measures to ensure that the term of limitation for the criminal proceedings, it goes to say, is a long duration and is a proportionate to the extreme seriousness of the offense. So they're talking about the weight of the offense, the weight of the penalty. Okay, we're not talking about somebody goes and murders somebody and you get probation for 6 months. This is not one of those United States weird cases that you see, that they basically try to use to agitate you, to harness energy from time to time. That's the whole point of creating hamster wheels, right? Like those mayors saying, hey, Moorish Americans, we recognize you. You can come do what you want to do for a week. But if you're not set up right when you leave here, we're pulling you over. Asking we state you're part of. Right? So, the state word is important. The state word is important. Okay? So it goes to say, commences from the moment when the offense of enforced disappearance ceases, taking into account its continuous nature. Continuous nature. Taking into account the continuous nature. This is a serious offense, and you have to take into account the continuous nature when you're enacting your law. Right? Each state party shall guarantee the right of victims of enforced disappearance to an effective remedy during the term of limitation. Article 9 reads, each state party shall take the necessary measures to establish its competence to exercise jurisdiction over the offense of enforced disappearance. So who exercise jurisdiction? The states. All the Moors argue over who can exercise jurisdiction. Well, the states. It said it right there, right? States. What state? Your Moorish state. Your 3 branches of government. Your state constitution with your state seal, etc. Right? I lost where I was. Okay. When the offense is committed in any territory under its jurisdiction, or on board a ship or aircraft registered in that state. Anybody ever watch Cops? when the alleged offender is one of its nationals. Also, when the disappeared person is one of its nationals and the state party considers it appropriate. So this doesn't ease up on anybody. If you're in the wrong, you're in the wrong. Whether you're acting as a corporation in another so-called state, whether you're a part of your own Moorish state doing some outlandish criminal activity, right? The international law does not exclude anybody for any reason. Okay. No sultan, no king, no group of people, nobody. And excuse my passion. I realize I'm kind of a little bit riled up, just slightly. So it goes to say, each state party shall likewise take such measures as may be necessary to establish its competence to exercise jurisdiction over the offense of enforced disappearance when the alleged offender is present in any territory under its jurisdiction, unless it extradites or surrenders him or her to another state in accordance with the international obligation, or surrenders him or her to an international criminal tribunal whose jurisdiction it has recognized. So it's pretty clear cut as to who can exercise jurisdiction over when they get so-called kidnapped. Right? This convention does not exclude any additional criminal jurisdiction exercised in accordance with international law. So, does anybody have any questions, statements, comments that's even outside of this document? We can open the floor right quick for any questions or comments. Take a breather right quick.
Islam. This is Raouf Bey. I wanted to figure out, as enforcing it, would we apply this to a quo warranto? Because an arrest doesn't necessarily mean a physical arrest. It's it's basically an international indictment. That's what this looks like. This is an international indictment that's bonding on states that belong to the UN.
So this word right here, right? So warrant, and then we talking about taking into custody, right? So you asked about the quo warranto, in which that's a procedure of states' obligations, right, to have those types of setups, right? But when we're talking about, again, it's the states that give. I was looking for a certain word, but give a quo warranto or produce a quo warranto, in which that when that happens, again, that has its procedures, and it would have to get up to a certain point for a quo warranto. You're right. We have to probably due process of law, but when we establishing, quo warranto, even liens and all that type of stuff, right? Again, we're talking about due process of law, in which that the state must have laws established first and foremost in order to get these things off the ground, right? We have to have templates. We have to have actual documents from the state And then therefore when something happens, because when we just have the treaty alone, it's the treaties itself just give you your power to do something. But you don't, the state, it's the Moorish state that must enact the law based on that treaty. Just because the treaties are there doesn't really mean that the states can like, so for instance, when you have a situation of enforced disappearance, if certain laws aren't set up to do anything, to go get a house, to whatever, you're trying to go do this way, as a Moorish national, you're trying to do this way as a Moorish national. If certain things aren't set up when you're trying to exercise yourself as a national in that state, then it won't work harmoniously, because the laws have not been enacted for you to do that, for the state to produce this type of activity or act like this, right? You have to enact laws, right, to have these type of actions being produced from anybody in that state, right? That's why when we take them to court, only then will certain things be enforced, right? It's a force then on these actions. So this power, right? The treaties that give us power, our authority, our delegated, have delegated us our authority, right? Our power. And then we have actions or enacted laws, right? Actions and power. But only when they're enforced is when all of this will be driven into to where they're supposed to be, right? Or more so where they're supposed to be, right? So when we're talking about all of quo warrantos and all these habeas corpus and everything, those types of templates, we're talking about first and foremost enacting a law so that you can prepare yourself for when things are enforced, and you can fully activate your full powers, or exercise your full powers, right? Because right now, even though it's Moorish states, we know we can exercise in full powers, right, as we set ourselves up through the various stages. But it's going to take development. It's going to take time, right? Just to see into the treaties takes 6 months, right? So we have to again balance each thing in its own proportion, right, in accordance to the full scope of things. So the quo warrantos and the straw man itself, and us being able to basically experience a change in reality will come once we prepare ourselves correctly, take this seriously, right, which means prepare now for these court cases, right? Because just because we Moors don't mean that it's just gonna fall on our hands, and the world just loves us, and all this types of stuff. We just kick our feet up. No. You got the wrong idea. You about to get resigned real soon thinking like that, right? So
May I add to that, good brother?
yeah.
But when you got a forward rental, you're questioning the authority of the other party. But when you're dealing, one of the problems with Moors in the old paradigm is that the but an individual cannot question the authority of a state, right? For one, if a Moor questions the authority of the United States or the judges, well, they derive that authority from their constitution, which is linked to what? The Treaty of Peace and Friendship. But that's left up to the state to question, not the individual. The state represents the individual. So if you got a problem with the United States, for example, it is Maru who would question the delegation of authority of the United States versus you yourself as the individual questioning the United States. Everything, that's where we've been dropping the ball, is we've been operating as individuals and looking to gain remedy from that perspective, but the fact of the matter is when you operate as an individual outside of your sovereign state, you're actually a Moorish subject, meaning you're subjugated to the laws of the United States jurisdiction. That's why it's important to set up our state so that now our state can deal with the United States on behalf of our nationals. So, for example, instead of it being the United States of America versus Burton Bay or Rodney Burton, it would be the United States of America versus Maru Republic. That's the difference, and that's the direction in which we need to go in terms of gaining our liberty and its sovereignty within Morocco, Islam. I yield the floor.
Yeah, that's right and exact. That's right and exact. That's a good point.
Point of interest.
Yeah.
If I may, I feel that law dealing with any type of claim is universal. For example, if someone, let's say the United States, placed a claim on a national, the state would then take over and say, in other words, there's three ways to answer a claim. And that state, the state would rebut the claim, and then it would be the obligation for the claimant to rebut the state's claim of jurisdiction over that national. In other words, they once you have a state saying that he's not in your jurisdiction or she's not in your jurisdiction, and then they come with proof or evidence of that, then it's up to now the claimant to come with a point that refutes the state's point. And if they can't do that, then they claim have to be dismissed. Islam, I yield the floor.
Yeah. That's exactly how things go. And we will have to, just before we carry on to Article 10, again, make sure at least so many laws are enforced through our states so that we won't catch any backfire while we're going amongst our daily duties. So we have to build our body up, right? Animate it. So Article 10. Upon being satisfied after an examination of the information available to it, that the circumstances so warrant, any state party in whose territory a person suspected of having committed an offense of enforced disappearance is present, shall take him or her into custody or take such other legal measures as are necessary to ensure his or her presence. The custody or other legal measures shall be provided in the law of the state party, but may be maintained only for such time as is necessary to ensure the person's presence at criminal, surrender, or extradition proceedings. Okay, so it's
and that's dealing with legislation. It's like if the law is not on the books, then you cannot adjudicate a person. Now, consular court could make certain decisions in the absence of legislation, but even in that case, the state would have to come back and enact legislation to support the decision that comes from consular court. And that you'll find that in Article 20 of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. So the point is, though, it's all about legislation. That's what you keep hearing here. You got to have legislation within your state, which, by the way, represents integrity of domains, which is one of the three triple principles: sovereignty and independence, integrity of domain, and economic liberty without any inequality. Integrity of domain deals with your laws, how you deal with your nationals, how you deal with foreigners, the due process of law, etc., adjudication. And so in order to make this treaty or international document or agreement, in order to make it enforceable, you need legislation that supports this document, so that now when someone violates those laws within your state, you have the laws available to adjudicate them based on the law itself. That's what they call Moroccan law in terms of the ICJ or the international law in general. Really, our treaties in particular, whenever it says Moroccan law or Moorish laws, what it's really referring to is our legislation that we enact within our states. Islam.
Yeah, exactly. As it states in the middle of Article 10 that we just read, the custody and other legal measures shall be provided for in the law of that state party. Right, so we're talking about legal measures. And when we say what legal measures, or what lawful measures, right? Because just because we're states doesn't mean we already have laws enacted as a state government. Right, it's a difference. It's a state is a government, right? But the state never dies, but the government once changed, once disappeared, right? It went dormant for a second, right? So the state and the government is the same thing, yet it has its differences. So just because we reestablished our governments, our state governments, doesn't mean we have the laws for that government. So we have to create these laws, right? And I know it's slightly off topic, but it might help you understand, anybody who's listening, for further clarity. When you're born into this world, you have what's called inborn ki or natural ki, right? Your natural breath, the power that you just came into the world with, right? The mindset you just came into the world with, as you are, right? Now that's different from other forms of ki that can take you, when I say ki, I mean QI, or what some people call CHI, chi, right? So it's different stages of this. So just because you come in with a certain power, backed by a certain power, that gave you a certain power to be a state, right? A person, that doesn't mean that you become this master and everybody should bow down and just, because you're by blood, you're a Moor, everybody should respect you as such, but politically you're not. You haven't taken the right actions after you came into this world. You have to make it holistic, not just 50-50, right? So part 2 of Article 10 states, a state party which has taken the measures referred to in paragraph 1 of this article shall immediately carry out a preliminary inquiry or investigations to establish the facts. Okay, so this is due process of law, investigations, right? It shall notify the state's parties referred to in Article 9, paragraph 1 of the measures it has taken in pursuance of paragraph 1 of this article, including detention and the circumstances warranting detention, and of the findings of its preliminary inquiry or its investigations, indicating whether it intends to exercise its jurisdiction. Okay, so this is a whole process, right, of indicating whether you intend to exercise such jurisdiction. Right. So you got to pay attention to the build-up. Okay, where does the arm go? Where does the leg go? Right? When you wake up, what is the natural things you already have to do without thinking? Well, breathing. Right? Just pay attention to the basics. Okay. Setup. So it goes to say any person in custody pursuant to paragraph 1 of this article may communicate immediately with the nearest appropriate representative of the state of which he or she is a national, or if he or she is a stateless person, with the representative of the state where he or she usually resides. Okay? So that's pretty self-explanatory, because when you're talking about states, you're talking about defined territory, i.e., a boundary, longitude, latitude. So this state word is pretty holistic. It's touching a lot of things. It's starting to sound like nationality, the word nationality itself, right? So Article 11, and I'm not sure how far we're going to get. We'll probably get around Article 13 before we wrap it up, 13 or 14. We'll see how time treats us. So Article 11, the state party in the territory under whose jurisdiction a person alleged to have committed an offense of enforced disappearance is found shall, if it does not extradite that person or surrender him or her to another state in accordance with its international obligations. So we're talking about treaties here, right? You have to move in accordance to the other international obligations, i.e. treaties, that's been established between the parties, right? It says, or surrender him or her to an international criminal tribunal whose jurisdiction it has recognized. So if they're looking like stateless persons or acting like stateless persons, right? What is the option? What is the option to do? Take them to International Criminal Tribunal whose jurisdiction it has recognized, right? So we can look at, well, let's continue reading. Submit the case to its competent authorities for the purpose of prosecution. So is the United States Corporation, or are they the United States of America? Because when we take it to court, only one avenue will be exercised, right? When things are established, we're going to look at, right, like the ICJ is going to look at all corners, leave no leaf unturned. Is everybody in the right places? Right? Only states can come to this case, speak on things. Let's make sure everybody's in the right places. Right? It's showtime. And let's just say things aren't, or people aren't in their right places. Right? There is no United States of America administration. There is nobody in those seats of office. So, when establishing these facts during the court case, who is going to be speaking to a wall? At what point? This is for the ICJ to find out and establish, right? Because only states, not we know that the United Nations knows what the United States is up to, but they can only point a horse to a water and tell it where to go drink. They can't make it go drink, right? Moors have been bypassing this word state, and the United Nations have been pointing at this word for a long time, right? So we have to take this in this seriousness, because life is coming at us fast. We don't want to just be hopping in the seats of government just because you're more, right? As well, let's continue.
I'd like to point out real quick, the reason why Moors been passing up on the word state, looking in the other direction, is by design, because of the sellout Moors out here, because of the sellout leader guys out here. We've been sold out, man. We've been sold out by our own people. We've been kept away from the proper information that was necessary for us to make a competent claim against the United States. And by that, and from that perspective, and because of that, I should say, remain in acquiescence, giving the United States the authority by default. And to add to the injury, by our own decree, we've been recognizing them as the sovereign authority. We call them the unit, we call them a country, we call them the government, and we vote for their elected officials, etc. We partake in the same system that's keeping us in acquiescence. And so those days are over with. And as we stand today, we're coming along with 7 states, and the ultimate goal here is to force decolonization and trade places with these people as the rightful heirs of the land. That's why I yield.
It's on. That's a good point, because as we're going throughout these study sessions, scan your mind and just realize how much you already knew, but wasn't in the proper order. A lot of this we already knew. So we don't want to beat ourselves up, but you want to beat yourself up when necessary, or be direct enough when necessary. Face the cognitive dissonance when necessary, because there's nobody holding us back but the Moors ourselves. Nobody. Literally. Everybody else is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So Article 11 reads, the state party in the territory under whose jurisdiction a person... Hold on, did we read this? Yeah, we just read this. Just a second. Okay. I believe we're at point 2 of Article 11. It reads, these authorities shall take their decision in the same manner as in the case of any ordinary offense of a serious nature under the law of the state party. In the case referred to in Article 9, paragraph 2, the standards of evidence required for prosecution and conviction shall in no way be less stringent than those which apply in the cases referred in Article 9 and paragraph 1. So we have to basically follow the exact law. There is no trying to exercise, a lane, basically Moors can't come into this with hate. Even though, we're facing death penalties and stuff like that, there's still aspects of government in which that if you're not aligned right, you're bound to be getting resigned soon anyway. Because regardless of how the world has been treating you, there's a certain way about coming into statehood. And that's in love. And by love, I don't mean being passive either. I'm talking about realizing this in the words, in the context, not just the energy, not, oh, kumbaya together, and we're just all looking to be spiritual and chant things away and write affirmations that have nothing to do with government, and just study the gods and goddesses and study the giants and look up all these other things that have nothing to do with nothing. Like, this is the only thing that will change this paradigm. That will. Everything else has been 50-50. This is holistically guaranteed will. Right? Guaranteed will. Not trying to manifest a will. So we're talking about, again, staying inside the scope of your own law. Right? That means following the law that came before you as you're establishing, enacting your law. Right? So we have to take this into account, that this due process of law is what we call a phase of which some Moors think they want instant remedy. They want them to pay now. They want them to go back to Europe now, et cetera, et cetera. In which, they want the remedy, they want the effects, the benefits of the treaty of peace and friendship right now. Right? They want to be able to work for themselves right now. Right? All this types of stuff, in which due process of law is not only a lawful process, obviously, but you guys may have figured that I speak to the groups of who concentrate on spirituality a lot and not necessarily international law, right? But we're talking about due process of law, not only in actual context, actual law, but we're talking about this being a spiritual concept as well, right? Because this is you learning law in itself, learning the due process of law. Acceding to the treaties takes 6 months in itself, right? Just becoming a state, you sitting in your Circle 7 state of facts, right? There's other processes, other layers as to you establishing yourself as a state. That's not the only thing that you must do. Right? So you have to go through your recognition process from the other states, right? Because that's who you want to do business and treaties with. That's who you want to build and develop with. Right? So there's certain phases. Okay. So, I definitely would just wanted to say that because, a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm all for more states and all this types of stuff. But why haven't the Moorish states done anything yet? Why haven't we seen anybody taken to jail yet? Why haven't you exercised any certain things yet? right? In which due process of law is the answer, right? So we must establish this activity, due process of law, etc. So as we continue to read, as we come to a close here soon, it says, any person against whom proceedings are brought in connection with an offense of enforced disappearance shall guarantee fair treatment at all stages of the proceeding. Fair treatment. Any person tried for an offense of enforced disappearance shall benefit from a fair trial before a competent, independent, and impartial or tribunal established by law. Article 12. Each state party shall ensure that any individual who alleges that a person has been subjected to enforced disappearance has the right to report the facts to the competent authorities, which shall examine the allegation promptly and impartially, and where necessary, undertake without delay and thorough and impartial investigation. Appropriate steps shall be taken where necessary to ensure that the complainant, witnesses, relatives of the disappeared person, and their defense counsel, who is the defense counsel, the officials of the state, right, as well as persons participating in the investigation, right, so anybody else that's on that case in the state, are protected against all ill treatment, okay, or intimidation as a consequence of the complaint or any evidence given. So again, Moors already knew this. We just had to reorganize or remember. It's not us trying to remember something from ancient times, right? Remember, what does it mean right now? And if you just went to boom, bam, right now, instant, reorganize. We just got to reorganize our thinking right now. Boom. That you can do. So it says, goes to say, where there are reasonable grounds for believing that a person has been subjected to enforced disappearance, the authorities referred to in paragraph 1 of this article shall undertake an investigation, even if there has been no formal complaint. Okay? Each state party shall ensure, so it's basically putting on the pressure, right? Even if there's been no formal complaint. Okay? Each state party shall ensure that the authorities referred to in paragraph 1 of this article have the necessary powers and resources that conduct the investigation effectively, including access to the documentation and other information relevant to their investigation. And B, have access, if necessary, with the prior authorization of the judicial authority, which shall rule promptly on the matter, to any place of detention, or any other place where there are reasonable grounds to believe that the disappeared person may be present. Okay. Each state party shall take the necessary measures to prevent the sanctioned acts that hinder the conduct of an investigation. It shall ensure, in particular, that persons suspected of having committed an offense of enforced disappearance are not in a position to influence the progress of an investigation by means of pressure or acts of intimidation, reprisal, aimed at the complainant, witnesses, relatives of the disappeared person or the defense counsel, or at any person participating in the investigation. Okay. So we might end this here, but as we see so far, that in regards to a person, right, the straw man itself, i.e., that's pretty much the theme of what today's study session is about. This person being a protected person, right? Who protects the person? The state, right? Regardless if, you created that person or straw man to act in that manner or not. When we're talking about yourself, talking about the state's boundaries, i.e. the longitude, latitude, right? We're talking about actual property, land, right? So things attached to it, like houses on top of land. Well, if you own the land, you own the house. If you claim land to the claim the land, you going backwards if you trying to claim the house and then claim the land. Like just because you own the house, that's like United States citizens saying, "Yeah, I bought the house," but they're not. They're stateless, truthfully. So they're being governed by the United States corporation, who takes that at any time they like, while the United States person thinks holistically that house is theirs because they paid it off or whatever the case may be. But we have to be holistic and say, look, anything attached to this land or anything attached to this body, anything attached to me, you, the straw man, right? When you lay claim to the core principle, everything else follows suit. Okay? You hit it from the top part, it'll trickle down. Right? The core is the same. So this person is to be protected, right? Or put in a Moorish state government. That's what we can take from today. What we can also take is these clear-cut articles that are pretty easy to utilize when enacting a government or enacting a law. Right? These are pretty self-explanatory. So I yield with that, and we can open the floor for any questions or comments before we close out. I'll go into this document in the next class as we will read further into the other document in relation to property, being ownership of property, land, right? So others might be thinking foreclosed houses and thinking like things of that nature. But we'll get into that document. But again, I yield the floor for any questions or comments before we conclude this study session.
My comment is this is an excellent document that you chose to go over. It shows how far behind the Moors are and how much of a waste of time it was for us to be out there marching and praying, begging and crying, we shall overcome, picket signs and all this BS, Million Man March and all these things, when the whole time all we had to do is enact legislation and follow the principles of international law. We would have been defeated the United States. This battle could have been over a long time ago. I mean, when you go back and look at the Act of Algeciras that's given us the authority over the military, the police, the control of the guns. I mean, when they say we were buried in a shallow grave, we really were buried in a shallow grave. And I will say it again. is because of our own people, Moors in fezes and turbans, as well as Negroes behind pulpits and even in the government, etc., secret societies, etc. This information has been kept from us, but it's a new day and time, and it has been time released. And now, Moors don't have any excuse. It is our obligation to enact Constitution, establish 3 branches of government, and hold the United States accountable in a competent way as opposed to the old paradigm, which was an incompetent way. I yield with that as well.
Islam. Yeah, a lot of this stuff could been out the way. You know, as we see this document that we went over is pretty it's initial in understanding. It doesn't speak on anything too difficult, right? In regards to understanding, we got to realize the initial phase is quite vast, right? And it's quite fast as well, as far as us coming into this fold of understanding. So we have to, again, we have to think steadfast, right? Steady and fast. We have to be balanced. We don't want to take too much time with it. We don't want to be the Moors that says, "Hey, well, I'm not confident enough to start a state government. I'll let the few other Moors in this state kind of do it because I don't think I know what I'm doing." Well, that's what you can reach out to other Moors for, because we're talking. All these Moors talking about. There's more Moors talking about statehood and international law in the correct light now, and you can see there's not many Moors jumping for joy. That's because cognitive dissonance. That's not because the white man or whoever is stopping you, or any other Moor got you, or any temple got you thinking a certain way, or any of that type of stuff. That's all spiritual tactics that's been embedded in you to prevent you from acting on something that you know you should be acting on. That's just the same thing as having a religious mindset, in the sense that you basically you're fearing God, in the sense that when you hear certain things, your whole body shut down. You can't act on it. Right? So we don't want to be in that. We don't want to be the more that's passive, that's inactive. Right? We don't want to be stagnant, just pointing. Right? Because it's again. I'll share this experience right quick before we close out. And Abdul will tell you, when I was in search of other Moors, to help establish a state, right, for so-called Indiana, properly marooned, I was ready to move. I was ready to move and go join ANPAC or ANPAC and hopefully be official there, because I was tired of explaining myself, searching, right? So to prevent all of that, take the time to not only study, but get even more active and reach out to people. If you don't understand, something going on in another state and you want to just chop it up with another one, okay, what's going on over here? Just reach out. Just reach out. Right? That's the only thing that's stopping you is yourself. That's just reach out. Right? So I can't stress that enough. I cannot stress that enough, because it's actually good-hearted Moors that know what they're doing, have good infrastructure, right? Good resources. But it's taken the inactivity. The inactivity is taken away from all of that. Because we're being, you might even be studying with a certain group, knowing that you're hearing the right thing, simply for the fact that you're not reaching out, is stopping you from being a prime minister of the Moorish state government, or Kazi, or whatever. So, we have to bring in, and again, I also encourage us exercising our character in a sense of discussing matters, right, to any degree with each other at our own table, not leaving it up to no policy enforcement, not leaving it up to no, other jurisdiction or courts, right? It's the Moors that have taught the word and is going to teach the word again. Okay. So it's going to take anything to any tension in any degree for us to first come in a friendly application, right, out of love, right, especially when we're talking about things that have a lot of tension on the table. Okay, that's why it's important to teach the other Moors that might be ignorant out of love. There's no point of bashing. Yes, you call it what it is. Yes. That's what tough love is for. That's what Saturn so-called energy is for. Discipline. That's what dad is for. Right? But you realize some people don't like, and I don't know if I'm ranting at this point, but some people don't like their dads because they don't like discipline. But that's another story. But I'm not going to get into all that. So if anybody else has any questions, comments, or anything else they like to share, I yield and again open up the floor to that before we close out.
Islam. I like to say I have thoroughly enjoyed this Moorish study session. With that being said, I think my understanding has been broadened, especially like in the part about when you were saying that that we have to do due diligence in law, creating laws, and I also kind of learned tonight why having paperwork precede you is so important. Real quick, just a little thing that happened to me some years ago. I was driving down the road, a cop stopped me and gave me a ticket. I didn't have my license on me at the time, and I just knew very little, but I knew enough to allow my paperwork to precede me. So I wrote up an affidavit of fact or truth or what have you, in good faith, submitted it to the clerk of court before my hearing, and everybody that went in there, it was two lines. A group of people was just wanting to pay the tickets, and another group was contesting the tickets. And those that were contesting the tickets didn't have any paperwork to precede them. But when I came up before the judge didn't ask me anything. He just looked at my paperwork and started questioning the cop. And long story short, I prevailed in not having to pay that large fine that the cop had put on me. So now I see why AMPAC, and various ones have done their due diligence to send in paperwork to serve notice to UN and serve notice promulgating, depositing, and I forget the other one, but I see why they sending in paperwork, because allowing the paperwork to precede their state, 3 forms of jurisdiction: personam jurisdiction, subject matter jurisdiction, and territorial jurisdiction have to be established with any claim before anything else can be done. So I see why the paperwork is so important. Islam, I yield the floor.
Islam. And that's another good point, because a lot of Moors are trying to lay claim to the whole entire landmass, in which that when we're talking about doing it like that, they're trying to lay claim to North, South, Central, so-called America, or which is North, South, Central Morocco, right? In which it's just totally out of line in several different ways. Okay, you can tell that those Moors haven't read the French versus United States of America court case, where it says a modern state, in which that when we look at modern states within the so-called United States, we're looking at 50 states, and arguably throughout various times. And so if that's 50 different states, so-called states, then taking over the entire landmass is your initial step, or let alone another two territories, right, as an initial step, can cause problems, right, in various degrees. So, we definitely talking about, if you're talking about the whole landmass, now you're just being illogical. If you're talking about a few territories, you're being more reasonable, right? As UNAMI has and can exercise if you go about it a certain way. So, what must be done is that we have to realize from the core point, right, what the modern state is, the very basics, and work from those very basics. Okay. Because when we work from any other way, we'll get nothing but confusion sometime down the road, right? So, with that, I yield the floor. And if nobody else has anything else to say or ask, we can conclude this meeting. We'll have our next meeting on Tuesday. It'll be at the same time at actually it won't be Tuesday. It won't be Tuesday. It'll actually be Monday. And as far as the officials of Meru, I'll talk to you individually or as a group about our internal affairs, and we'll have our meeting for that. But as far as our meeting, another study session for more so the open forum, that'll be on Monday, 6 p.m. Okay, so I hope to see you guys soon.
Islam, Akil.
Yes.
Actually, the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday of next week. Per the calendar, it's scheduled for Thursday.
Okay, Thursday. Okay, Thursday. Okay, so the officials of Meru, whoever's on, you guys can again check your schedules in the email. And as you heard Sarah say, the next meeting is Thursday. So, with that, I conclude this meeting.
Wait, what time again?
At 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So with that, we'll conclude this meeting, and I hope to see you all Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. May Allah bless you all.
Islam, peace and love.
Allah, peace.
Peace and
Peace
love.
and love, everyone.
Long peace and love.
Peace more.
Hey, peace and love, Morris. My apologies for not putting y'all on taking y'all off mute. Oh, shoot.